We're going to hear from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita today. And we're going to sing one bhajan before we read Chaitanya Charitamrita. On page 76 in the songbook, this bhajan is, the name of it is Nam Sankirtan, and the first line is Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha. Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Lila, Puri Lila. important song. Very important song. The meaning is as follows. Hariharaya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. These first two lines of this song, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to sing it. When he went out on Harinam, Sankirtan, he himself would chant these names. And then later on, many years later, when Narottam Das Thakur became guru, became prominent, he wrote the rest of the words in the song. He added it to that. So here's what it means. O Lord Hari, Lord Krishna, I offer my obeisances to you, who are known as Yadava, Hari, Madhava, and Keshava. O Gopal, Govinda, Ram, Sri Madhusudan, Giridhari, Gopinath, and Madan Mohan. Then Narottam continues, all glories to Sri Chaitanya Nityananda, all glories to Sri Advaita Acharya and his consort Sri Sita Thakurani. All glories to Lord Hari, to the spiritual master, the Vaishnavas, Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. All glories to Sri Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and Raghunath Das Goswami. I offer my obeisances to the feet of these 6 Goswamis. By offering them my obeisances, all obstacles to devotion are destroyed and all spiritual desires are fulfilled. I am a servant of that person who is a servant of these 6 Goswamis. The dust of their holy feet is my 5 kinds of foodstuffs. This is my desire, that birth after birth I may live with those devotees who serve the lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis. When these 6 Goswamis lived in Braj, Vrindavan, they revealed the lost holy places and they explained the eternal pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Absorbing your mind in meditation upon the divine feet of the spiritual master and the holy Vaishnavas, chant the names of Lord Hari in great ecstasy and worship the transcendental land of Vrindavan. Desiring to serve the lotus feet of Sri Guru and the Vaishnavas, I, Narottam Das, sings this Sankirtan of the holy names of Lord Hari. So, it's a nice, important song because here he stresses the 6 Goswamis. Now, why does he stress the 6 Goswamis? Because they, first of all, they were sent to Vrindavan by Lord Chaitanya to excavate the lost holy places where Krishna performed his pastimes 5,000 years before. It had become a jungle, and they went there. And they, rediscovered the places of Lord Chaitanya, of Lord Krishna's pastimes. In Vrindavan, of course, Krishna performed his childhood pastimes, the Damodar Leela, which we just finished that period, took place there in Vrindavan. Krishna's Rasa dance was performed there in Vrindavan. So many pastimes. But over time, in due course of time, 5,000 years, even a holy place like Vrindavan gets covered over. In 5,000 years, even a spiritual movement gets covered over. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I come again and again to re-establish things. So he came again as Lord Chaitanya. And his mission was to re-establish Krishna consciousness. And from his time, from Lord Chaitanya's time, down to, a few hundred years, Krishna consciousness was also becoming covered. But then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he appeared and he began to preach. And then his son and follower, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, began to expand. Before Bhaktisiddhanta's time, really there were no temples with devotees living in it and going out doing Sankirtan. That's how things became covered over. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur instructed his son, you have to revive this. And so he established 64 mats, 64 temples, all over India. And in these temples he had brahmacharis going out daily, distributing books and performing Harinam Sankirtan all over India. But he wanted it to come to the West, to the English-speaking world. And one of his disciples, Srila Prabhupada, took that order to his heart. And he came alone, came to America and began doing Harinam Sankirtan in New York City. And the rest is history. Now there are thousands of temples all over the world. And these books which the Goswamis had given us is now translated in over 50 different languages. All by Prabhupada's mercy. So Narottam says, we owe all this to the Goswamis, the 6 Goswamis. Because they not only re-excavated the holy Krishna places of Krishna's pastimes, but they wrote. They lived there when there were no temples. It's described that they were living under a tree. Each of them had their own tree. And they lived like that, and they wrote these amazing books. They wrote so many books, it was enough to fill a bullock cart. Actually, Janananda Maharaj was telling us on the disappearance of Shyamananda Goswami, how Shyamananda Goswami, Narottam Das Thakur, and Srinivasacharya, they went to Vrindavan and got all the books, and they were bringing it back to Bengal, because a lot of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followers lived in Bengal. Lord Nityananda Prabhu went door to door to every house in Bengal, him and his followers, and preached Krishna consciousness. But they had no books. There was no books. All the books were in Vrindavan, under the care of the Goswamis. They were instructed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to write these books. He empowered them. And so then these 3 devotees, Srinivas, Narottam, and Shyamananda, brought the books out of Vrindavan to Bengal, And from there, actually it really started moving everywhere with the appearance of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And he said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted this to go not only in India, but he says, Priti vite ache jato nagaradi gram, sarvatra prachar hoibe moranam. In every town and village of the world, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is his order. He wanted it to go. But nobody was doing it. And then Bhaktisiddhanta began to repeat this order to his disciples. He first sent some of his disciples to London, but they were not able to accomplish much. And after he left, Prabhupada took up the order and came west, and he was able to accomplish it. Prabhupada began sending his disciples everywhere, all over Europe, all over America, Africa, China, Japan, everywhere. And his disciples, Prabhupada's disciples, began translating these books into the different languages. So now you can get these books in Russia, everywhere. So, by the mercy of the 6 Goswamis, we get these books. So that's why Narottam is saying, he's stressing how important they were, saying that I am living on the dust of their feet. That's my food. He said, that's my food. I'm living on them. And he says, birth after birth, I'm a servant of anyone who serves these Goswamis. And incidentally, the first song Prabhupada sang for the devotees was the prayers to the 6 Goswamis. So he informed us, these Goswamis are most important. So today we shall read from continuing Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we are reading where the Lord Chaitanya, his tour of South India. We've heard, when Lord Chaitanya left Navadvip, he took sannyas while he was in Bengal. He took sannyas at the age of 24, and he left. He went to Jagannath Puri and made his headquarters there. And from there, he did a tour of South India, he did a tour of Vrindavan on foot. Because in those days, 500 years ago, there were no vehicles, no trains, no motor car, no airplanes, nothing. So, if you look on a map of India, you will see it was great distance, hundreds of kilometers, thousands. But Lord Chaitanya went walking, and here we are reading about his tour of South India. And as described, we read earlier, he converted the whole country, all of South India, single-handedly. Because wherever he went, he would chant, and he would instruct people to chant Hare Krishna. And he would tell, these people would go back to their villages, and they would tell everybody to chant. And this way, the whole of South India became very Krishna conscious. So we are continuing here. While on his tour of South India, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would spend the night at a temple There are many temples in South India. Many ancient temples, actually. You can look in the book Chaitanya Charitamrita. There are copies in the bookcase, and there are copies in Srila Prabhupada's quarters. And in those books, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you will see pictures of many temples in South India. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would stay at these temples, or he would spend the night on the side of the road. And wherever he accepted food from a person, he would give them the same advice that he gave to one Brahmin named Kurma. He adopted this process until he returned from his South Indian tour back to Jagannath Puri. Thus, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would remain at night in one place. The next morning after bathing, he would start again to go to another place. In this way, he covered all of South India. It's amazing. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, he left the previous home of Kurma Brahman. The Lord, Kurma Brahman followed him a great distance. He had become attached to having Lord Chaitanya in his house. But eventually Lord Chaitanya took care to send him back home. Then there was another Brahmin named Vasudeva. This Vasudeva was a great devotee, but he was suffering from leprosy. He was a leper. Indeed, his body was filled with living worms. And although this devotee was suffering from leprosy, this Brahmin, Vasudeva, was enlightened, because as soon as a worm fell out from his body, he would pick it up off the ground and put it back in the sore. This is most unusual. Then one night, Vasudeva, the leper, heard that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had arrived in that area. So in the morning, he woke up and he went he went to the house of the Kurma Brahman, hoping to see Lord Chaitanya. But when the leper Vasudeva came to Kurma's house to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was informed that the Lord had already left. So the leper then fell to the ground unconscious, crying, because he thought, I missed him. I missed him. There are many devotees who were coming around to the temple during Prabhupada's time. And then Prabhupada left. And they were all lamenting, we missed him. We missed him. But we encourage them, yeah, he's not dead. He's just, his soul never dies. But he's just gone somewhere else. So Lord Chaitanya, this Brahman, this leper, he was crying and lamenting due to not being able to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But the Lord immediately turned around and returned to that spot and embraced the leper. Now this leprosy is a disease of the flesh, not just the skin, and it's contagious. In fact, lepers they don't stay normally. People don't want them around. People don't want to see them. They don't want them around because they're afraid if they rub against me, I might get it. So generally they live outside of the city, outside of the village. here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back, being omniscient, he could understand this is a great devotee, and he's lamenting that he missed me. So Mahaprabhu turned and went back. And when he got there, he embraced the leper. And immediately, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's body touched the leper, both the leprosy and his distress went to a distant place. It means he became cured. Vasudev's body became very beautiful to his great happiness. He was astonished to behold the wonderful mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so he began to recite a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam touching the Lord's lotus feet. So you can see he was an elevated person. Although he was a leper, he was chanting Srimad Bhagavatam shlokas. So he chanted one verse. This is the verse the Brahman chanted. Kwaham daridra papiyam, kwa Krishna Sri Niketana, Brahmabandhu iti smaham, bahubhyam parirambita. Means, who am I? A sinful, poor friend of a Brahman. And who is Krishna? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, full in 6 opulences. Nonetheless, he has embraced me with his 2 arms. This is the perfect verse. I think this verse was spoken by Sudama Brahman. And so now this leper Brahman, thousands of years later, he's saying the same verse because he knows that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is none different from Krishna. The Brahman Vasudev continued, O my merciful Lord, such mercy is not possible for ordinary living entities. Such mercy can only be found in you. And upon seeing me, even though I'm a sinful person, all my sins go away. Even a sinful person goes away due to my bad bodily odor from his leprosy. Nobody wants to get near him. But yet you have touched me. Such is the independent behavior of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he could understand. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Krishna. Being meek and humble, the Brahman Vasudeva worried that he might become proud, having gotten this mercy of Lord Chaitanya. He was worried that I might become proud after being cured by the grace of Mahaprabhu. So he expressed this in his humility to Mahaprabhu, and to protect the Brahmana, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised him to chant the Hare Krishna mantra incessantly. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. By doing so, he would never become unnecessarily proud. And this is Mahaprabhu's mandate to all devotees. Trinadapi sunichena, tarorapi sahishnuna, manina manadena, kirtaniya sadahari. What is the meaning? Who can say? You gotta say it louder.
One should be more tolerant and one should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself loyal and strong and straight. One should be more tolerant and free devoid of sense of false prestige. One should You need to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord
constantly. You forget one thing. He said one should respect all others and don't expect any respect for himself. So Mahaprabhu says, he gave this instruction to this Brahmin and told him he would never become unnecessarily proud. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also advised this Brahmin Vasudeva to preach about Krishna and thus liberate other living entities. As a result, Krishna would very soon accept him as his devotee. Prabhupada gives a nice purport. Although Vasudeva, Vipra means Brahman, although he was a leper and he had suffered greatly, still Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cured him. And the only return the Lord wanted from him was that Vasudeva should preach the instructions of Krishna and liberate all human beings. This is the process of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. Each and every member of this movement was rescued from a very abominable condition. Do you all agree? Prabhupada says each and every member of this society was rescued from a very abominable condition, but now they are engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. They are not only cured of the disease called materialism, but they are also living very happily. Everyone accepts them as great devotees of Krishna, and their qualities are manifest in their very faces. So if one wants to be recognized as a devotee of Krishna, then he should take to the preaching work, following the advice of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then one will undoubtedly attain the lotus feet of Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who is Lord Krishna himself, without delay. So we're getting ready for the Christmas marathon. This is a most important instruction to the devotees going out to remember. They are going out by the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Prabhupada once told the devotees, a devotee came to him saying, "You've been so merciful to us. How can we repay you? What can we do to repay you? We are indebted to you." And Prabhupada says, actually you cannot repay the debt given by the spiritual master. It is so great. But if you want to try, then go out and preach. So that is the only way we can repay this debt. So if you feel that you've received something, that you have benefited by taking to Krishna consciousness, then the only thing to do is to go out and preach. After thus instructing the Brahmin Vasudeva in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately disappeared from that place. Remember, he came back in a miraculous way. He had left, but being omnipotent, he could understand this Brahmin when he found out that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had left town. He fell on the ground and was crying, thinking, I missed him. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back, embraced him, cured him, and then gave him this instruction. If you want to repay me, go and tell everyone. Preach Krishna consciousness to everyone you meet. So, and then Mahaprabhu disappeared from that place. Then these two Brahmanas, the Kurma Brahman and Vasudeva, the leper, where he's no longer a leper, they both met and embraced one another and began to cry, remembering the transcendental qualities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Thus I have described how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reclaimed the leper Vasudeva, and so he received the name Vasudevamrita Prada. Vasudevamrita Prada. This is another name of Lord Chaitanya. Vasudevamrita Prada. It means Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who delivered the leper Vasudeva. Thus I end my description of the first tour of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in him visiting the temple of Kurma and liberating the leper named Vasudeva. One who hears these pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with great faith will surely very soon attain the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I admit that I do not know the beginning nor the end of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. They are unlimited. However, whatever I have written, I have heard from the mouths of great personalities. Krishnadas Kaviraj, remember, he wrote this book after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had left the planet. But he heard it from the associates of Mahaprabhu, and he went to Vrindavan, and he was requested by the devotees in Vrindavan to write Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Prabhupada says he began writing this and he was over 90 years old. He was very old. And he wrote this great masterpiece, which Srila Prabhupada says, this is postgraduate study. He said Bhagavad Gita is like the ABC of spiritual life, and Srimad Bhagavatam is graduate study, but Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate. So, O devotees, please do not consider my offenses in this regard, for your lotus feet are my only shelter. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishnadas, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, 7th chapter, describing the liberation of the Brahman Vasudeva and the Lord's tour of South India. At the end of every chapter in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj offers his respects to two of the 6 Goswamis, Rupa Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami. They are his Shiksha Gurus. When he went to Vrindavan, he accepted them as his Shiksha Gurus. And he doesn't forget it. Every chapter he glorifies them. He doesn't even say anything about his own Diksha Guru. He just glorifies these two. again, as Narottam Das Thakur in the song we sang, how important are these Goswamis? So we have time. Now we come to the 8th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Madhya Lila talks between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy.
Agnideva,
Yes?
would it be possible you could read the purport to text 152? You did read that one.
152? Oh yeah. In 153.
No, the purport to 152.
There's no purport for 152. It's 153 you mean?
Well, in my book it's 152. The one who hears these pastimes of Sri Chaitanya with great faith will surely very soon.
That's 153. That is 152.
There's a lovely purport.
No, there is no purport. But 153 comes after, and then there's a purport.
No, then the database is wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a purport that
Yeah, I'm going to read that.
when a person actually revives.
The purport?
When a person actually revives his consciousness with thoughts of Krishna, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he revives his spiritual life and becomes addicted to the service of the Lord.
That's not in this book.
Strange.
And this is the.
This is the most important
This
purpose
is supposed to be an original.
That's really strange.
Look, see? 152, no purport. 153. Now there's a purport.
That purport's completely missed out.
Dilemma. Well, let's read it.
Let's read it.
Yes, please read it. So the verse is
152.
152. One who hears these pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with great faith will surely very soon attain the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
And the purport is,
Purport.
when a person actually revives his consciousness with thoughts of Krishna, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he revives his spiritual life and becomes addicted to the service of the Lord. Only then can he act as an acharya. In other words, everyone should engage in preaching, following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this way, one will be very much appreciated by Lord Krishna and will quickly be recognized by him. Actually, a devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu must engage in preaching in order to increase the followers of the Lord. By thus preaching actual Vedic knowledge all over the world, one will benefit all mankind.
Wow.
Strange.
I didn't hear the last sentence.
One will benefit all mankind by preaching.
By thus preaching actual Vedic knowledge all over the world, one will benefit all mankind.
Yeah, I don't know how.
That's really strange. I'm going to write to revisit it.
Yeah. I mean, this is just another proof that the devotees working on the books, sometimes they make mistakes, leaving out of this purport, which is so important. It's amazing. And later on, years later, they find it and they put it in the database.
Yeah,
I don't have the database.
that's why sometimes some little editing has to be done on the new printing.
Right. But this purport is very similar to one I read earlier.
Just a bit more.
When Mahaprabhu's, after curing the leper, Vasudeva, the leper wanted he expressed in humility that he didn't want to become proud now that he was cured and his body became beautiful again. He didn't want it to go to his head. When Mahaprabhu says that if you preach, you chant Hare Krishna incessantly and you go out and preach to others, then you won't, this won't happen. So, Krishnadas Kaviraj continues. I admit that I do not know the beginning and end of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. However, whatever I have written, I have heard from the mouths of great personalities. Purport. This name, Vasudevamrita Prada, is mentioned in the verses composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya incidentally wrote, there's a book. He wrote 100 Sanskrit verses glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this name, Vasudevamrita Prada, is one name of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he gave. When a person actually revives his consciousness with thoughts of Krishna, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, here is the purport. Here is the purport. What you just read?
Yeah.
It's here. It's in this purport.
Which number verse?
153. Yeah.
In Gita verse 153 hasn't got a purport.
See?
I'm trying to look at the Veda verse.
He said, here it is. Isn't this what you read? When a person actually revives his cosmic consciousness with thoughts of Krishna by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he revives his spiritual life and he becomes addicted to the service of the Lord. But there are some lines before it, so it's put in between. Prabhupada continues. Only then can he act as an acharya, and he becomes. No, in other words, everyone should engage in preaching. In other words, everyone should become acharya. Everyone should be. This is also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction. Amar agya guru hoy tara desh. He says everyone should become a spiritual master and preach Krishna consciousness. So here Prabhupada is paraphrasing that instruction in his purport. He says, everyone should engage in preaching, following in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this way, one will be very much appreciated by Lord Krishna and will quickly be recognized by him. Actually, a devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu must engage in preaching in order to increase the followers of the Lord. By thus preaching actual Vedic knowledge all over the world, one will benefit all mankind. So somehow or other they pushed it to the next verse. But I was thinking, wow, how could they leave this out? Just a mistake of sorts. So, this is also most important as we are getting closer to the Christmas marathon. This purport, you can read it every day during the marathon and get inspired. O devotees, please do not consider my offenses in this regard. Your lotus feet are my only shelter. So that was the ending of chapter 7. So if we have time, we can begin chapter 8. Talks between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy. The summary of this 8th chapter is given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Prabha Bhashya. So here, this is a summary of the 8th chapter. After visiting the temple of Jayada Nrsimha, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the banks of the river Godavari to a place known as Vidyanagara. When Srila Ramananda Roy went there to take his bath, they both met. Ramananda Roy and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met. After being introduced, Sri Ramananda Roy requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to remain in the village for some days. Honoring his request, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed there in the home of some Vedic Brahmanas. In the evening, Srila Ramananda Roy used to come to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ramananda Roy, who was clothed in ordinary dress, offered the Lord respectful obeisances, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu questioned him on the object and process of worship, and also asked him to recite verses from Vedic literature. At this time, Ramananda Roy was governor. He was governor of Madras in South India. So it just mentioned, Prabhu just mentioned, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioned, he was dressed in ordinary clothes. It meant as a government officer, he wasn't dressed like a Vaishnava, you could say. But he requested Mahaprabhu to stay in town for a while. He wanted to get more of his association. So Mahaprabhu agreed and to stay there for a few days, and every evening Ramananda Roy would come to spend time with him. First of all, Srila Ramananda Roy enunciated the system of the Varnashram institution. He recited various verses about karmarpana, stating that everything should be dedicated to the Lord. He then spoke of detached action, knowledge mixed with devotional service, and finally, the spontaneous loving service of the Lord. After hearing Srila Ramananda Roy recite some verses, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted the principle of pure devotional service, devoid of all kinds of speculation. After this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Roy to explain the higher platform of devotional service. Then, Srila Ramananda Roy explained unalloyed devotional service, love of Godhead, serving the Lord with pure servitude, as well as in fraternity and parental love. Finally, he spoke of serving the Lord in conjugal love. So he explained the 5 rasas of devotional service. Serving the Lord as a servant, serving him as a friend, serving him as a parent, and then Madhurya, serving him as the gopis did. He thus spoke of how conjugal love can be developed in various ways. This conjugal love attains its highest perfection in Srimati Radharani, in her love for Krishna. He next described the position of Srimati Radharani and the transcendental mellows of love of God. Srila Ramananda Roy then recited one verse of his own. Means he composed a verse. He recited one verse of his own concerning the platform of ecstatic vision, technically called Prema Vilas, Vivarta. Srila Ramananda Roy also explained that all stages of conjugal love can be obtained through the mercy of the residents of Vrindavan, especially by the mercy of the gopis. All these subject matters were thus vividly described, and gradually Ramananda Roy could understand the position of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited his real form, Ramananda Roy fell unconscious. After some days, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Roy to retire from government service and come to Jagannath Puri to live with him. These descriptions of the meetings between Ramananda Roy and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are taken from the notebook of Swarup Damodar Goswami. So right away, just from these notes, you can understand the exalted position of Ramananda Roy. Although he's a governor, working for the government, he's actually a Mahabhagavata, an elevated devotee. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is drawing it out of him. He asked him questions. And he gave answers and supported all his answers with verses from scripture, thus showing what caliber of devotee he was. And on top of that, he spoke one of his own verses. So how exalted is Ramananda Roy? Actually, it is said that he is the Rag Mag Guru of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ramananda Roy and Swarup Damodar, they spent the last few years with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as he was feeling intense separation from Krishna. They were helping him, coaching him by singing songs and reciting verses from Srimad Bhagavatam and other places. So you can see how Mahaprabhu, just by talking with him, he says, I want you. You must give up your job. Come and live with me in Jagannath Puri. And he became one of the principal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This will all be elaborately described as we read this chapter. So, we shall stop there for today. So next week, we'll begin. One thing I mentioned, I forgot to it says that gradually Ramananda Roy could understand the position of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He could understand it. He is Krishna. You are Krishna. He could understand. By talking with him, he could understand. You must be Krishna. This is not ordinary. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then showed him. There's a nice painting where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed him that he is both Radha and Krishna. He manifested these two forms for Ramananda Roy. And when he saw that, he fainted unconsciously. Because that is highly unusual. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, remember, he come in disguise as a devotee. He presented himself as a devotee. And whenever people, while he was in Jagannath Puri, if anyone said, you must be God, you must be Vishnu, he would cover his ears. He wanted to be no, I'm just a devotee. That's all I am. But here, when he met Ramananda Roy, he didn't fight it. He came out and showed him, yes, I'm Radha and Krishna. This is a wonderful pastime. So, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Right. Agnideva Prabhu.
Jai.
I have a question.
Yes, you have a question? Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to know why Chaitanya Prabhu had so many difficulties to meet Prataparada, and with Ramananda Roy he accepted to meet him and discuss with him.
Yes, good question. How did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu come to meet Ramananda Roy? After he had converted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Remember, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a Mayavadi. After he converted him, he also showed him that he is Krishna. He showed him, I think, the Sadbhuja form, a 6-armed form. There's a form, there's a picture in the book. Krishna, this form, Sadbhuja, Lord Chaitanya, he has 2 arms, like Lord Chaitanya, golden complexion, one holding a danda, and the other hand holding a water pot. And then there's 2 arms holding a flute. It's Krishna. And 2 arms holding a bow and arrow, Lord Ram. So he showed him, I am Ram and I am Krishna also. Now, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was getting ready to go on tour, to leave Jagannath Puri, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya came to him and said, there's something I want you to do. When you get it in South India, there's one person there, you must meet him. Who is that? He says, he's a Ramananda Roy. He's a government officer. He said, I knew him from before, means when he was a Mayavadi. He says, but I couldn't understand him. I couldn't understand him at all. The things he would say. But now that you have converted me, now that I've gotten your mercy, I realize what he is. And he's like you. So I think you two should meet. And it would be good. So that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we will read it, the description, when they met on the banks of the river Godavari. Ramananda Roy, being a government officer, he was accompanied by many servants. I think they brought him there on a palanquin. He was just coming to take bath. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a sannyasi, barefoot, bare feet, and he doesn't even have a danda because Nityananda Prabhu broke his danda. And when they met, Mahaprabhu embraced him. And both of them went into ecstasy, began crying and laughing and dancing and chanting and rolling on the ground. And all the servants of Ramananda Roy were watching him. They were bewildered and thinking, why is this sannyasi behaving like this with this government officer? They couldn't understand. But Mahaprabhu could understand. He could understand this is a great devotee. And he wanted his company. So he said, you give up your job and come to Jagannath Puri. And the king of Puri, Orissa, Prataparuja Maharaj, he heard about it and he told Ramananda Roy, yes, you can, because Ramananda Roy went to him and said, I want to resign because I want to come and spend my time. I want to spend the rest of my life with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That was his conviction. And the king said, that's all right, you can go, and I'll give you a double pension. Not just your regular pension, I'll double it. Because the king became also a devotee. So he gave Ramananda Roy a double pension so he could be in Puri. So that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very quickly embraced him. He also did similar things when he met Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They also were they were Muslims. They were working for the governor, the ruler of Bengal. And they came with beards and long hair, like Muslims. But when Mahaprabhu met them, immediately embraced them. He knew their heart. He knew it. He said, actually, you are my eternal servants. So he knows. He knows who they are. And he knows who Ramananda Roy is too. Ramananda Roy is one of Radharani's principal gopis. So, who can understand the mind of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, here. Actually, all of Mahaprabhu's associates, they all took birth before him, scattered in